Good evening and welcome to the Telegraph Journal and Rogers TV presentation of the local campaign candidate debate for the riding of New Brunswick Southwest. I'm your moderator, JP Lewis, and we are live from the Rogers studio in St. John, New Brunswick. Tonight's debate will focus on the federal issues in New Brunswick Southwest as the people of the riding select a member of parliament in the federal election on Monday, October 19th, 2015. The order of the candidates has been determined by a draw prior to coming to the stage. Joining me are the candidates Karen Ludwig from the Liberal Party, Andrew Graham from the NDP, Gayla Macintosh from the Green Party, and John Williamson from the Conservative Party. Next, please welcome our panelists for the evening. First, we have Laurel Lyle from CHSJ and John Wishart from the Telegraph Journal. Both are journalists for media outlets in Greater St. John. For the rules of the debate, each candidate will begin with a 30-second introduction, opening statement. Then the first candidate will be posed a question from our panelists. The candidate will have 60 seconds to respond. Each of the remaining candidates will also have 60 seconds to provide a rebuttal response. After all candidates have commented, there will be a 2-minute and 30-second moderated discussion on the question. All candidates are encouraged to participate in the discussion. As the moderator, I will guide the discussion to the best of my ability. Tonight, we will attempt to ask as many questions as possible during this broadcast. As we near the end of the debate, the open discussion may be altered in order to ensure all candidates have equal time for closing statements. The closing statements will be delivered in reverse order, and each candidate will be given 1 minute for their final remarks. First, we begin with Karen Ludwig and their opening comments.
Thank you. I'm very pleased to be here tonight and represent the Liberal Party of Canada. I'm a mother, a business owner, a university teacher. I am a certified international trade professional. I've lived in this riding for over 26 years. We've raised our children here. We've worked our businesses here. I've taught many, many people here in the New Brunswick Southwest community, as well as in St. John and the Fredericton areas. It truly is a pleasure to be here and be a voice for New Brunswick Southwest. Thank you.
And next we have Andrew Graham from the New Democratic Party.
Hello, and thank you to all the audience for taking part in the democratic process of getting to know more about the candidates and what they have to offer. I'm a carpenter and a woodworker, and I raised 3 children in St. Andrews for 9 years. Although I currently live in St. John, I've spent many hundreds, if not thousands of hours going to community meetings all over the riding to be in touch with people and what their hopes and dreams are for the future. And I'm confident that I'm the person that can help deliver that through the policies of the NDP.
And from the Green Party, Gayla Macintosh.
Hi, my name is Gayla Macintosh. I am here as the candidate for the Green Party of Canada. I have lived in this riding most all my life. I grew up here, I worked here, I live here, and I plan to grow old here. And it is my pleasure to be here this evening on behalf of the Green Party and with all of my buddies.
And from the Conservative Party, John Williamson.
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here this evening. I want to thank Rogers and the Telegraph Journal for sponsoring this debate tonight. This is an important opportunity for the audience to hear some of the ideas that are being put forward. It's been my honor for the last 4 years to be Member of Parliament for this vast riding of New Brunswick Southwest, where there are very, very many different issues, and they don't always come together in terms of a single riding issue. So we're going to talk about those issues tonight and what makes this riding difficult to represent, but at the same time, a real pleasure to represent.
And the first question from the panelists.
Thank you, JP. The first question, I believe, goes to Karen. New Brunswick Southwest, like most regions of the province, is suffering from an out-migration of young workers seeking employment elsewhere. What single federal policy or program would be the greatest catalyst for job creation in your riding?
Thank you for that question. Certainly under the Liberal plan, we will be offering the largest infrastructure project in planning in Canadian history. That in itself will double what the Conservatives have offered in terms of infrastructure investment. We need jobs that are on the ground. We need jobs that are New Brunswick Southwest specific, and we need to fill the needs and the wants of people in our area. To date, The Harper plan, as well as the Williamson plan, has certainly failed on the economy. Nothing has happened of any significance in New Brunswick Southwest, and more specifically, in July, when checks were released to local businesses and local initiatives, we certainly welcome any kind of investment and attention from the federal government. In July, a week before the election was called, we lost 3.5 years of opportunities. We will take immediate action. We will work on the investment projects as well as investing in youth in terms of education and skills training to bring people back here and help people stay here. Thank you.
And now each of the candidates will have a minute to weigh in. Mr. Graham?
Yes, I believe that you cannot just solve this with one policy plank or one idea. There have been 7 decades since the Second World War where we've had this decrease in our rural populations that has shrunk from over 50,000 farms back then to less than 3,000, somewhere in that area. And as well, our inshore fisheries have suffered. Forestry management has resulted in the loss of communities being able to raise their families, and we see the manifestation of this, the symptoms, in the closing of our rural schools and courthouses and hospitals being threatened. The way to turn that around is to re-examine the zeal to which some of these governments have signed these trade agreements that have resulted in the outsourcing of jobs, whether it's raw saw logs or pulp logs being exported to be processed overseas, or fisheries products, or even undermining of our farm sector through cheap imports. These things have to be nailed down and attacked. Thank you.
Ms. Macintosh?
As each and every one of you, as well as myself, there's nothing worse than having to see a loved one, whether it be a son, a daughter, a brother, or a husband or wife, having to move away to go somewhere where there's jobs, because there is a lack of jobs here. And in Southwest New Brunswick, just like all of New Brunswick, we're seeing the same. We're seeing the lack of jobs. What the Green Party wants to do is to put investment into social development, which means the creation of small businesses as well as helping with small businesses. Instead of the government putting towards the big corporate affairs as well as the banks, put it into our people, put it into our children, put it into the education that will allow the children to be able to get good jobs in this area. We want to increase in social development. That's where we want to invest. And
Mr. Williamson?
I think that's a good question, but I don't think there's one single issue. I find in New Brunswick we spend too much time talking about the silver bullet, the one answer that's going to solve our problems. We have to do a whole number of things. We have to do them right. Our government in the last 4 years, we've worked to balance the budget, something that one political leader says will happen by itself. But we know from experience here in New Brunswick, budgets don't balance themselves. But while we did that, we lowered taxes on working families, seniors, and businesses, and we also increased transfers to New Brunswick to a record high. But at the same time, what else are we doing? That's the fiscal side. We've put in place a trade agreement with the European Union, a market of over 500 million people, where our products, whether it's from timber or fisheries, are going to be able to get into that market, which has it's wealthy consumers, and we'll be able to get in there at a better price. Tariffs are going to come down. We've also invested heavily in infrastructure, whether it's roads or wharfs. At the same time, we've been the party in the government that's promoting Energy East, a pipeline project that all 3 of these parties opposes. And that's a project that's important for the national interest and for job creation here in New Brunswick for New Brunswick workers. Thank you.
So now we have our open discussion segment of 2.5 minutes. Mr. Williamson mentioned some of the other party positions. So if any of the other candidates want to step in at this point.
I'd like to address the problem of Eastern Energy East pipeline. The issue is that we already have the liquid natural gas plant, the Irving Oil Refinery, the Coulson Cove, and Point LaPro. New Brunswick is already struggling with low tax revenue and low jobs, and some of the poorest people, and the lowest, the highest unemployment rates in the country. And if people can really believe that this Energy East pipeline is going to be the golden bullet to solve our economic woes, I challenge that. We have to diversify more into renewable energy. And if anything, we have to make sure that the Energy East pipeline has a strict regulatory framework to make sure it's safe, not what we have right now.
So maybe before going back to Mr. Williamson on Energy East, we'll let the other candidates talk about their party's positions, starting with
Regarding Energy East, our party supports any initiative that will create jobs in a sustainable and a responsible manner. Had the Harper government not cut so significantly in the area of science and scientific research, maybe the provinces would trust the environmental assessments that are being conducted. So two, in terms of the oil industry itself, Harper has placed all of his eggs in one basket in terms of the oil industry. We need a diversified economy. Energy East may be part of that as long as we can get permissions and approvals from the communities as well as the provinces. New Brunswick has said yes. We're waiting for approvals from Ontario as well as Quebec.
Ms. Macintosh?
As far as Energy East, we are totally against that for the simple reason is it's going to infringe upon our waterways, which would infringe upon our fisheries and the people that work in these areas, such as southwest New Brunswick. Shale gas, absolutely not. The reason we're not looking at these right now, and we refuse to look at them, is first of all, we feel that they're not safe. And second of all, is why don't we look, Canada is full of resources. New Brunswick is full of resources, and we're giving them away basically for free. Why don't we look at those things first before we even introduce other things? And as far as jobs are concerned, if we looked at those things first, then we would be able to create jobs.
Mr. Williamson, how about?
Well, on that, and I'll respond to Karen. This is an issue locally where Frank McKenna supports the pipeline. Premier Gallant supports the pipeline. It has the NDP leader provincially supporting it. It has multi-partisan support. But we found both your leaders, they were saying one thing to us in New Brunswick, then going to Quebec and saying something else. It wasn't until Mr. Trudeau was on the CBC here in New Brunswick when they called him out on that, and he declared it would be wrong to conclude that he supports Energy East. This is the problem. Your party's put up all kinds of roadblocks to resource development. You say you support it in principle, but in actual fact, you don't. And what that is, you're just ensuring that more young New Brunswickers are going to keep going to work in Western Canada in industries we could have here, and with them their families follow them, and our communities hollow out. That's the wrong approach for New Brunswick, and I'm actually astounded. I thought there would be some resistance to the accusation that your parties don't support Energy East, but you've actually stated just that here today that you're not enthusiastic supporters. You said it doesn't have.
Okay, just one at a time. Maybe if you want to quickly respond before we go to the next question, just 30 seconds.
I think it's very unfair and typical of you, John, to put words in other people's mouths. Our party supports anything in collaboration. Right now, we do not have the support of Ontario or Quebec. And that would require
and that's why we need a government to fight for this. We don't need representatives from New Brunswick who are going to just bow to Quebec and Ontario. We need to have people in Parliament that are going to fight for this pipeline and not wait. Well, if Ontario and Quebec says yes, we'll approve it. That's the wrong approach. We need to go to Ottawa and say we're going to fight for this pipeline because we're going to fight for New Brunswick jobs.
One at a time. Mr. Graham, we'll have one more point on this, and then we're going to go to the next question. We'll have more open discussion throughout the hour. So, Mr. Graham, your point, and then we move on to the next question.
Thank you. The point is that a few years ago, Thomas Mulcair warned of Dutch disease that we would fall into, and sure enough, Alberta has fallen into this. They put so much of their eggs in one basket, now they're struggling to get out of it. That's the same problem we would fall into here with all our energy projects in New Brunswick. That's why I'm talking about diversified renewable energy on a community basis. And it's very similar to what Gayla is proposing. That's what we need, not these huge capital-intensive corporate-run projects, but more community-based renewable energy. That's the road to a sustainable future.
Thank you, Mr. Graham. Laura, with the next question.
Thank you. The Canadian Medical Association says Canada's older population is set to almost double over the next 20 years and quadruple over in the 85 and older population. So what would you do to ensure that our healthcare system is prepared to handle this influx of seniors?
There are a number of problems to address this, and some of the problems are long overdue. We need much more preventative healthcare out there. And as I say, this should have been started in the 70s. And a lot of the diseases that people are being afflicted with are coming up now, like cancers, different kinds of cancers and diabetes. So we have to right away change the kind of food regimen that we're promoting in Canada, and make more, better lifestyles more promoted as well. Financially, healthcare has to be delivered much more efficiently. That's obvious. And we've heard different panels talk about this on the CBC and other areas. We have to tighten up and make sure that it's run more efficiently, but also make sure that corporations are paying their fair share for being able to do their business in this country. It's a race to the bottom to think you can always drop corporate taxes just to make sure that you snag them here. They don't reward you with that money. They put it in their tax havens elsewhere. We have to change that policy.
Ms. Macintosh?
Yes, we are all growing old, and in some cases we don't know, and we don't know where we're going to end up. As far as the seniors concerned, we have two ways that we want to look at the picture, and one is that we want to, well, actually three. We want to be able to invest into research and development as far as looking for better care, as far as the products in the pharmacies. We want to have an overall Canadian universal pharmacy, shall I say, where everybody in Canada would be allowed and able to be able to get all their medication. Right now, what we're seeing in New Brunswick is we have the rich and we have the poor. We have the ones that have to decide whether they want to buy their groceries or if they're able to buy their prescriptions, and that shouldn't happen. And we also want to allow it that these seniors are able to stay in their homes longer.
Mr. Williamson?
Well, we need a federal government that's a partner with the provinces, and over the last 10 years, that's what we've had with the Conservatives. Under our government, the Conservative government, every year we've been in office, transfers to New Brunswick and all provinces have gone in one direction. That's up. This year, New Brunswick will receive just under $2.7 billion from the federal governments to help with health in particular, education, social services, and any other provincial initiative. That money's there for the benefit of the province to allocate. But folks, we have a problem. We have, yesterday they reported in Canada for the first time that there are more people over 65 than under 15. And today, New Brunswick has the record in the country for the number of people over 65. It's because of failed policies where we don't develop our resources that are seeing more young people leave to greener pastures elsewhere. We need to create jobs here and diversify our resources. There are many good-paying jobs in New Brunswick Southwest. The challenge is there's not enough of them. And the same thing with seniors. Our problem here in New Brunswick isn't that we have too many seniors. We have too few young people. And the policies of my opponents here are going to further that trend and continue to see young people leaving for greener pastures elsewhere. We need to change that.
Ms. Ludwig?
Thank you. Healthcare. Certainly New Brunswick has the most aged population in Canada. So it's very surprising that we know, knowing this, that the Harper government would stand up and not renew the Canada Health Accord. Not renewing the Canada Health Accord will cost this province $715 million. So serious decisions have to be made on the health and education side. I did not hear anything from my MP standing up to fight for health care in New Brunswick and say, we need to renew the Canada Health Accord because renewing the Canada Health Accord will continue to have solid opportunities for New Brunswickers. Not the only answer, but certainly part of the solution. Our federal government rarely looks at New Brunswick-based solutions to problems in this province. The Liberal government will decrease and go back to the eligibility age of the GIS from 67 back to 65, strengthen the Canada Pension Plan, look at PharmaSave, pharmacare in the communities, and also recognize that New Brunswick can be a model for healthcare and aging populations in Canada. We could learn from our opportunities, not be penalized for an aging population. Thank you.
So now we have our 2.5 minutes of open discussion since Ms. Ludwig addressed the policies of the Conservative government. Maybe we'll have Mr. Williamson respond first and then the other candidates.
Well, sure. We have, as a government, we have put a plan forward that's going to see health transfers to New Brunswick increase every single year going further to record highs every single year over the next 10 years. So we're doing our part. your government, when they were in office, when they balanced the budget in the 1990s, cut health transfers by 30%. And just a few weeks ago, your leader, Justin Trudeau, said that was the right approach. Our approach has been to balance the budget by looking at waste, overlap, duplication in Ottawa, and maintaining transfers to the provinces for health and education. So we're not going to be lectured by a Liberal Party that actually cut health spending by 30% when it balanced the budget, and today saying that we're at record levels and that's not enough. I mean, I realize your party thinks money grows on trees and you're going to go into big deficits to pay for more, but that's not the way forward. And you talked about strengthening the CPP. That's a tax increase. The average family under your plan that earns, if an individual earns $30,000, they're going to pay another $800 in CPP tax, and their employer is going to pay another $800 for every employer they have that earns $30,000. If they earn $60,000, that tax hit's going to be $1,200 on every employee and employer.
Okay, Mr.
So
Williamson,
that's not a good record.
Just so we can get, we'll give you a chance to respond, but Mr. Graham, if you want to weigh in.
Sure. Well, the NDP has actually the best fiscal track record of any party in Canada, and since we're the ones that brought in healthcare back in the early the early 60s, we feel especially proud and want to defend our healthcare record. But there's other issues too, and we might talk about pharmacare. There's a possibility that we could bring in pharmaceuticals at a much cheaper price, and this has been possible for years, but neither of the federal parties that when they've had the chance have brought it in. And part of the problem is some of these trade agreements where they've allowed some of the international corporate players in the pharmaceuticals world to dominate the discussion and not allow us to have cheaper pharmaceuticals. That has to change. And, sorry.
That's okay. We'll give Ms. Macintosh a chance.
Well, the one thing with the pharmacare project is it will, first of all, save Canada $11 billion a year. And second of all, the whole idea is to buy it bulk, to buy the prescription, the medication bulk, and use one company.
And we'll give the final word of this segment to Ms. Ludwig.
Thank you. The Canada Health Accord was actually brought in by the Liberal government under Paul Martin, and under that legislation, it had to be increased every year. So thank you for following through on what the Liberals had put forward. Secondly, that formula has been recalculated for the provinces. So while with John saying that it's going to increase, it is not going to increase for the province of New Brunswick.
That's
in
false.
fact, that formula has been rewritten to honestly hurt the province that needs it the most will be receiving the least. With the most aged population, we have a tremendous opportunity here to develop New Brunswick solutions for healthcare, for caring for aging, for giving opportunities for seniors living in their own homes longer, so we can prepare the rest of the country as the rest of the country has an aging population.
Okay, we'll move on to the next question.
This question goes to Gayla. Have the Conservative government's changes to the employment insurance program hurt or helped the riding's economy? And what changes would you advocate to EI as an MP?
Well, first of all, I guess looking at the first part of the question, has it hurt? I would say that what we're seeing in Southwest New Brunswick, at least the people I've been talking to, is a lot of the employers now are not hiring full-time. They're taking the preference of hiring part-time, which means that they're not having to pay out any benefits. And that way a lot of the people who are working for them aren't able to get the benefits, as well as they're not able to get the sick days or anything along those lines. So the employers are gaining, but again, the employees are losing. What we would do is we would bring the wages up to $15 an hour, and that way it would give everybody a fighting opportunity to be able to I mean, as you well know, everything is going up in price and nothing is going down, and our wages are staying the same. So that will help all the way around.
Mr. Williamson?
Well, look, a lot of issues there. I mean, one correction, it's actually someone that is a part-time worker costs the employer more than a full-time employer because, of course, EI, once you hit a certain salary level, you max out the tax. So it's actually not correct. And the employers in my district, in our district where we live, They're looking for workers. They're looking for more workers. There's a line right now in Connors that sits empty because there's not enough workers there. But you're absolutely right as well about the need for families to earn a decent wage. You know, that's why we've lowered taxes on working families. We kept taxes down on businesses so they can hire more people. We're not putting up payroll taxes the way the Liberals are proposing, which will hurt job creation. We're helping parents with families by putting money directly in their pocket so they're able to make their budgets meet at the end of every single month. I mean, you know, people in this district work exceptionally hard, and when they send someone to Ottawa, they want to know that person is going to work just as hard as they are to make sure government's on their side, working for them, fighting for them every single day.
Ms. Ludwig?
Thank you. In terms of the employment insurance program, the changes made under the Harper government have certainly hurt our area. They are centralized decisions not taking into consideration the needs of local employers and local employees. We do have a seasonal workforce in this area. I would suggest that the Harper-Williamson plan for our riding has been a plane ticket west for people that were impacted directly, not only by the lack of employment, because the opportunities have not been there as fruitful as my colleague might suggest, but as well the availability and the eligibility for EI. In terms of the local employers, whether we're looking at Connors or Pat Jarrell's, Cooks, who I've all spoken with, they definitely are looking for more employees, but they've also been looking for temporary foreign workers to fill some of those positions. So we have two issues. We have a high unemployment rate, but we also have employers that are also looking for temporary foreign workers. Calling local people names in terms of brownies and white people is completely counterproductive to serving your area.
Okay, Mr. Graham?
Thank you.
Well, I believe the measures that have been enacted with the EI program have further marginalized our rural economies, and Karen did say the word seasonal, and that is an issue. It's a reality that we in the Maritimes deal with. That a lot of our the nature of a lot of our work is seasonal. And EI is a valuable tool to make sure that people can have a decent standard of income without feeling desperate. And to me, it has been counterproductive to cut back on the benefits and to make them less available when, in fact, the EI fund was paid for independently. It's supposed to be arm's length from the government, but back in the 90s, $50 billion was taken from that fund to balance the books by the federal Liberals, and then just recently several more billion by the Conservatives to balance the budget, when it ends up as an extra tax on hardworking people. That's not what should have happened.
Okay, so we have our open discussion again, and maybe since the Conservative government and you were named personally, I'll let Mr. Williamson respond first.
Well, we made some changes, and the province's own report on those changes couldn't find how that had negatively affected our workers. In fact, employment insurance continues to be there for workers when they're out of work through no fault of their own. And that's the way I think the program should work. It's there when we need it, and those are the changes we've made. Now, Karen likes this line that our economic policy is a plane ticket west. But look, it wasn't the Harper government that put in place the highest income tax burden in New Brunswick, which is the highest now in North America. It wasn't the Stephen Harper government which turned its back on responsible resource development, which saw in the first quarter of this year the largest exodus of New Brunswick men and women in 35 years as a result of the Gallant policies. And it wasn't our government that has raised taxes here, making it more difficult to create jobs. We're going in the opposite direction. You're proposing to make it easier to collect EI. We're proposing to make it easier for men and women to find work. So it's a different in view here. With our trade accords, with our low tax plan, with opening up markets, with Energy East, we want to see more and more people working, and we won't be satisfied until everyone that wants a job has a job.
Okay, Ms. Macintosh?
Well, I have one thing to say, like to John, is when we talk about part-time work compared to full-time work, it is cheaper for the employer. For the simple reason, by the employer hiring part-time workers, they don't have to pay overtime. So they're going to opt to go with the part-timers and have them work the overtime so they don't have to pay time and a half for them, where they would for the full-time worker who works the 40-hour week.
Yeah, but you don't pay overtime until you're over that threshold. My point was you said the government's made it more expensive for employers to hire part-time workers. That's simply not true. Now you're thinking of the U.S. model. That might be the case where we've seen the terrible stories down in the U.S. where employers are keeping people under 30 hours a week. But in this country, our policies are geared to make it easier for employers to bring on people full-time and to make it less costly for them to do so. That's all I was saying.
What have you done in New Brunswick Southwest
Ms.
to
Ludwig,
help
just
that?
before we get back to
Thank you.
Mr. Graham, we'll have 30 seconds.
Well, I'd just like to say that some of the policies that are being brought in, are being encouraged, such as Energy East, they sound great, but it's just encouraging another boom-bust cycle. There's no long-term jobs there, or very few long-term jobs. And in fact, if there was a spill, and Trans-Canada Pipeline has a history of spills and leaks, it cuts a corridor right through a very productive agricultural area of our province, and also the tanker traffic would further compromise very good fisheries jobs and processing jobs along the Bay of Fundy. I think the proper course is to look before you leap, and when you look at some of these potentially tempting projects.
And Ms. Ludwig, final word on EI?
In terms of EI, for those of people that have had to resort to employment insurance, the 2-week waiting period is a long time to wait without any money. So under the Liberal plan, we are shortening that to 1 week for those that need it. In terms of our area in particular, we have the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement that's being negotiated in secrecy, without transparency, without openness. The rumor is, high speculation, it will be signed before the election day of October the 19th. That has the potential to put farmers out of work. Why are we not engaging in that kind of conversation?
Well, Karen, if that's true, your party will have a chance to take a position on it. But I remember just a few short months ago, you and the local MLA, Rick Doucette, were at the Algonquin celebrating the Canada-European Free Trade Agreement that our government negotiated. Now, I'm pleased to see that, because when I
But you didn't negotiate the rights of farmers.
when I fought my first election in 1988, it was actually fighting Liberals who said free trade was a bad idea. So I am glad you and other fellow Liberals have now seen the light and are supporting our trade agreements. This one is still being negotiated. The Prime Minister has spoken out, as well as our trade ministers say supply management will be protected. So we'll see when the deal comes out. Your party will have a chance to pronounce on it. And I look forward to that, because you won't just be able to throw rocks.
A very brief response from Ms.
Ludwig. I will
Ludwig.
very briefly. As an international trade professional, certified to import and export between Canada, the US, and Europe, I well support trade agreements, but they have to be clearly negotiated. Negotiating in secrecy and potentially ruining an entire sector within our riding that is so fragile to begin with is not acceptable, John.
We've negotiated 30 of these already. We've negotiated 30. I'll let our record speak for ourselves.
Okay,
we stand up for Canadian industry.
Last word to Mr. Graham.
As Karen has very well pointed out, these trade agreements are being negotiated in private and secrecy by unaccountable, unelected officials. And the problem is that this government has negotiated this during an election, which should be hands off. The other problem is that they're trying to introduce foreign subsidized milk and milk products into this country that would undercut hardworking, honest people in rural areas. It's another cut of 1,000 cuts that it's going to undermine our rural sector. And that's, to me, just unacceptable.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Graham. Moving on to the next question.
New Brunswick has been ranked first among all 10 Canadian provinces by degree of student debt, and second when it comes to tuition fees. Students in New Brunswick who graduate with debt owe an average of around $35,000 compared to the national average of around $22,000. What can be done to make getting a post-secondary education more affordable?
Well, good question. I'll tell you what maybe should not have been done, which was the gallant government decision to do away with the tax rebate credit that had existed in this province previously, where when young New Brunswickers get a degree and come home and find a job, they're able to write off their tuition costs. But you're absolutely right, and that's in terms of the cost of education. And that's why our government has increased transfers to education to New Brunswick and other provinces every single year that we've been in office. At the same time, we've also expanded the opportunity. When I was in universities 20-some years ago, the focus from the federal government really was get a university degree. But we've discovered as a country that was the wrong approach. We need to open up the trades, and we need to open up apprenticeship, and we have done that. Today we have a skills shortage in exactly the type of work that they're currently doing at the St. John refinery. And while most of the men and women who work there are from New Brunswick, they've had to bring in some workers from other parts of the country. Nothing wrong with that, but I'd like to see those jobs go to New Brunswick workers first. So we've done a lot as a government to encourage young people to go into the trades by offering rebates to employers if they hire someone as an apprenticeship, and as well to the student as well to offer incentives for them to pursue those. So it's a multi-pronged approach that we need to take to get people to improve their skills.
Thank you. Ms. Ludwig?
As a college instructor in the area of trades and international business, as well as a university teacher, I fully support a college or university education or any kind of form of training. In terms of the Liberal plan, our plan is to offer more incentives and more opportunities for people to go back to school with some reassurance of a grant system. Planning for the future for jobs is a little bit trickier now when we look at where to put the emphasis on when the long-form census has been cut. And that was our greatest statistical resource in terms of looking at the jobs for the future. We can definitely train people on the jobs for today, and they will have a student loan with that. Training for the jobs for the future, we need to have a vision, we need to have a plan, we need to have our long-form census and statistical database more available. And I would remind my colleague that I am not running for the provincial Liberal Party, I'm running for the federal Liberal Party. And again, you constantly try to blur the two to confuse people in public. Not acceptable, John. Do your job, serve the people the way you should. Thank you.
Mr. Graham?
Well, I've talked to a lot of people over the years who are just struggling and they're frustrated. One fellow I remember clearly in Penfield had spent $5,000 to get his heavy equipment operator's license, and he couldn't get a job anywhere along the coast because he didn't have experience. So a lot of young people are caught in that trap. Just another person I talked to last week, a woman trained in psychology. She's working as a clerk somewhere, and she just can't get her foot in the door of the trade that she wants, of the training and the skills that she would like. We have got to give our youth the bridges available so they do not feel trapped, so they can enhance their skills, and even our child care program would help get people ease the burden so they would have their children taken care of if they had to go to retraining. There's so many tools that are available, easing student debt and providing more incentives for upgrading. There's so many tools that are available, and we've had, as I say, we've had decades of each party to attack this in this riding and across the country, and I don't see the issue being solved.
Ms. Macintosh?
I agree. Like we have so much to work on as far as our children stand. As far as our education is concerned, we need to be able to make it more accessible for students to be able to go a lot further with their education, whether it be in trades or plumbing or anything like that, whether it be in tech. But on top of that, the Green Party, we want to get right down to the bones and get down to the tuition. Why should a student have to spend 6-7 years in college and then have to try to find a job to pay a debt? They can't afford anything else except to pay that debt. The banks aren't going to look at them to buy a house because they have to pay this $50,000 debt. We want to look at that tuition. We want to look at eliminating that and having it funded by the federal government, where it's working in all other countries but not here in Canada.
Okay, now on to open discussion. I don't think we've had an open discussion yet where Mr. Graham started, so why don't you start the open discussion this time?
I think one of the things that hasn't been on the table much is how much corporations are becoming much more involved in our universities. And I think that is a process we have to reverse as soon as possible. They are putting too much of their own agendas in, grabbing hold of research and patenting some of that research to their own profit. There has to be a clear delineation between corporate interests and what happens at the university. And the government, the federal government, should be our agent to tackle that.
Do others have ideas on post-secondary education and the involvement of the federal government?
Well, look, our government has also increased spending on research, applied research, the sciences, by $16 billion since we were elected in 2006. We are making significant investments in this area to universities, looking to bring students up to a higher level of education understanding so they can go to the workforce, find good jobs. But at the same time, we have to have a good job market here. And there's no point in training people if we're just going to have the resources in Western Canada. That is effectively the Brian Gallant policy today. When the last election he talked about training and it sounded great. The funny thing was he did it with an airplane in the background as a photo op, and that basically is where the result or the end result of his policy is going to lead. We need to create those jobs here as well, so we have the university education tied to the opportunity, because doing one without the other is not going to serve our long-term interests here in New Brunswick.
Ms. Ludwig?
Well, thanks for that question as well. I think certainly looking at the universities in this country, we do need some federal role in terms of NSERC grants and others that have been so drastically cut. If we look at the area that's being funded in terms of the sciences, it's certainly funding towards sciences in a particular industry. If a young person today was interested in a scientific type of position or occupation, they may have to think twice because those jobs aren't as readily available as my colleague has suggested. We could look no further than the St. Andrews Biological Station to look at the cuts that are there. We have a beautiful facility. The research is not nearly as robust as it once was. It was a world-leading research facility. You can ask any scientist that works in that facility, those that have left, those that have retired, those that have left through attrition. We could also look at our freshwater facility in Ontario that was cut, that was world-renowned in terms of research and development. The universities and the federal government certainly have a role to play together. In terms of the province, I'm not here working for the Gallant government, so I really can't comment on what Mr. Gallant has offered, but I can say that I would work really, really hard as the Member of Parliament in this riding to work with the college, because we only have one college campus, but also working with the universities that serve this community to best serve the scientific community so we could best serve our country and best serve our international partners.
And we're just going to let Ms. Macintosh have the final say of this segment.
We need education, and we need it more accessible. And in order for it to become more accessible, it has to be granted so by the federal government. And how that is going to happen is the only way it's going to happen is by the federal government to grant it. Our kids now are looking at university and they're knowing that they can't afford it, so a lot of them are opting out of that plan and going to Alberta to work for $25 an hour.
Or more.
Or more.
Okay, so we're going to go. We have time for one more question, but we're going to have to shorten your initial answers to 30 seconds each. So the last question.
Okay, thank you. There was one brief reference earlier in the debate to the Temporary Foreign Workers Program. Changes to that program will reduce the number of foreign workers allowed in the province, including to industries like aquaculture and seafood processing, which are heavily dependent on them. How do we meet the need for workers in these sectors within a more restrictive TFW program? I think it's Karen.
Meeting the needs would be taking the program and looking at it in terms of New Brunswick solutions. Taking a policy that is Ottawa-based and centralized across the country is our first mistake. We need to look specifically at these industries and look at what the employers are asking for. We also need to look at the people that have been so successful filling our schools, buying items from our grocery stores, working within our communities, enriching our communities with diversity, and helping them find a path to citizenship.
Mr. Grant?
I think actually the temporary foreign worker program should be dismantled. I think a preferable solution would be to have immigrants brought in on the road to full citizenship so that eventually they can get full rights, be part of a union, and be part of a full part of parts of our communities, part of our economies, contributing, just like many of us were when our ancestors came off the boat. That's the better solution, I believe.
Ms. Macintosh?
What happens right now is there's a program in place that when the immigrants come to Canada, they are matched up with an employer. That's what needs to happen with Canadians. Canadians who are looking for jobs, whether they're young or old, they need to be able to have a program put into place like that, which is what the Green Party is offering, is we want to have a program in place that matches Canadians up with employers. just as the government now matches immigrants up with employers.
Mr. Williamson?
Yeah, I think Andrew's absolutely right. I mean, the best opportunity we can provide immigrants and new Canadians is to give them the same economic rights that every Canadian citizen have, which is the opportunity to come to this country, work hard, climb the economic ladder. That wasn't the case under the old temporary foreign worker program that we changed, where TFW workers would come. They were not permitted to leave their job and to go find opportunity elsewhere. This was having the effect of suppressing wages in these industries. We thought that was wrong. We think those jobs should go to Canadians first. But the Liberals are proposing that we weaken it and that we open the doors again to allowing companies to bring in more temporary foreign workers. Karen won't put it that way, but that is what her leader, Justin Trudeau, said.
Ms. Macintosh, you haven't opened one of our open discussions, so why don't you begin?
Pardon?
You're going to start the open discussion.
I'm going to start the open discussion. I'm enjoying this. I just really feel that, like myself, I was born in Boston, and I moved here when I was 7 years old, and I've lived in the riding ever since. But my mother was an immigrant, landed immigrant, so she had to apply, of course, and everything else. But I think those areas should still be in place. Those programs should still be in place, for the simple reason of a lot of times it's not individuals that are coming over, they're families that are coming over. So we have to have something in place to be able to help the immigrants. But on the same note, we have to have something in place for the Canadians, for all us Canadians, so that we aren't put on the back burner. We have to have that same program that's offered to immigrants. It needs to be offered to Canadians.
Ms. Ludwig or Mr. Graham?
I'd like to say that actually the problem that this government, the Conservative government, had to deal with was the abuse under their program of the temporary foreign worker program, where bank tellers were, and even tradespeople in Alberta and across the country were brought in to the country to undermine our own workers. And I know this from people down the coast on the Mascarene near St. George. One of her son was trying to finish her apprenticeship and was bumped off because of temporary foreign workers. So it's one thing to have this program, but these trade agreements actually make it easier for foreign countries to use their leverage. This is the TPP, the CETA with Europe, and the FIPA with China. All allow them to use their leverage to push to have more workers in our country, undermining our own citizens.
Ms. Ludwig?
With the Temporary Foreign Workers Program, the way it was designed, it's always Canadians first. The fact of the matter is the local employers are having a challenge finding local workers to fill these positions, so they are resorting to temporary foreign workers. Of the temporary foreign workers that are coming in, many are achieving not only great success, but we're finding people that love to live in our community. We live in a riding where our population is declining. There is an opportunity there. In fact, when the Temporary Foreign Workers Program was changed for anyone after April 1st, 2015, that would be in the country after their 4-year limit would be considered an illegal immigrant, nobody fought to help the local businesses. Pat Jarrell's, for example, said they needed help. They needed an extension on the program. We didn't get anyone asking or voicing an extension. In fact, Alberta got an extension of a year. There was nobody standing up for the rights of the businesses that needed help for business solutions.
Karen's wrong on that. Companies like Pat Jarrell last year could have had the opportunity to bring in up to 55% of their workforce as temp TFWs, and it's 45% this year. What companies don't like is that they have to go first to find Canadians. We are not allowing companies to come in as their first option to bring in TFWs. And I know you support that policy, and I know that's the policy of Justin Trudeau.
No, we asked for it to be reviewed in 2014, and
Karen, I'm not interrupting you.
Jason Kenney said it was fine.
And it's a policy of the Gallant government to ask Ottawa to reverse those changes. We're not going to do that. I'll tell you what we're doing instead. In a few,
you should run provincial politics, John.
In about 19 days, we're going to put our colours away and we're going to get back to work working for the people of New Brunswick. What we're doing right now with the provincial government, the federal government, is working on the provincial nominee program. That way we bring in immigrants who can come to this country and have the same economic rights as we do and our kids do and our parents do. That's how we're going to be successful over the long term. It's not by creating a permanent underclass that does not have the same opportunities as every other Canadian.
Thank you, Mr. We're going to have to wrap up to get to our, unfortunately, we only have an hour. But thank you for that lively discussion and answering the questions. We're going to go in reverse order of what we did from opening statements. So for closing statements, we begin with Mr. Williamson.
Well, thank you. I hope you found this informative today and we didn't speak over each other too much. I've enjoyed getting to know people over the last 4 years, getting to know their issues. And I think as a Conservative government, we're on the right track. Since the economic downturn in 2008, the country has created 1.3 million jobs, most of them in the private sector, the vast majority, 80%, and the vast majority, over 80%, full-time. At the same time, we've managed the country's finances well, and we're on track for more of this. Record investments in health, education, infrastructure, low taxes for families, businesses, and seniors. And I think this contrasts sharply with what my opponents are charging. Now, the Liberal candidate doesn't like being tied to the provincial Liberals, but in fact, a year ago, we saw Mr. Trudeau and Mr. Gallant arm in arm as they were campaigning around. The federal Liberals saying the New Brunswick plan was a template for the federal plan. I mean, so consider the Gallant plan. He's proposing to run large deficits to fund spending. He promised a tax increase on the very wealthy, as the Liberals are doing today. But of course, once he was in office, he went after seniors and increased gas taxes. So the tax increase on the Liberals began with the wealthiest, but it's trickled down to everyone else. And finally, like Mr. Trudeau, Gallant opposes resource development. So I would say to listeners, if you like the job that Brian Gallant is doing here, you should probably vote for Justin Trudeau, because you get the same thing in Ottawa as we're getting here in New Brunswick. And that's not a plan for New Brunswick or for the country. Thank you.
Ms. Macintosh?
Thank you so much for listening us to, excuse me. Thank you for listening to us this evening. We've really enjoyed our time here together as well with you. As October the 19th comes up, as each and every one of you prepare to go to the ballot box, please remember that that is your vote, nobody else's vote. And as you stand and ponder on who you want to vote for, please look at each and every one of us and decide to yourself who is going to best represent you.
Mr. Graham?
Thank you for everybody for listening to this exchange. Politics is what you make it, and we need more involvement than ever from our youth. But there are things that have become discouraging in the past few years. Some of the political mail drops we've had have insulted the intelligence of our voters and have spread lies and used inflammatory, divisive language. And that is not the kind of politics that I want to engage in. This election is not just about politics or economics or the environment. It is about our direction as a society, the future of our communities, and about charting a path of sustainable economic development that is a fertile ground for jobs and social well-being. When it comes to our public institutions like Canada Post, the CBC, the Canadian Wheat Board, and even our healthcare, these were achieved through hard work and sacrifice to create services for our common good, not just for us, but for our children and grandchildren. The NDP not only has the best fiscal track record of any party, but is a staunch defender of healthcare, of fighting against poverty and homelessness, and looking after our seniors and veterans, and working to protect our jobs from trade and investment agreements that have in the last 25 years undermined the ability of the working class to achieve stable, well-paying jobs. This is my fourth campaign as your NDP candidate, and we came in second in the last election through hard work. Over the past 10 years, as I've talked with people, they want a greener economy, fairness, and honest, clean politics. That is my vision, to help bring prosperity through sustainable rural economic development and to make Canadians proud of their country and their government again. And I'm up to that challenge. Thank you.
Ms. Ludwig?
Thank you. I'm very, very pleased to be here tonight and share my concerns, my opportunities, certainly my strengths, and some of share the voice of people, what they've said to me at the doors. People at the doors are asking for local representation. Currently, they're not sure who their MP is and what he actually looks like. They want someone that can work in collaboration with the province, not fight with the province. Our provincial premier, the office of the premier, asking for help from the federal government is not begging. They want a member of parliament that will be available. They're looking for real change. They're looking for a federal government that will make investments in this riding, investments that are specific and unique to help out the wants of people in this riding and the needs. We know why people are leaving the riding. One of the reasons why people stay in the riding is because they're here for the quality of life and the environment, and both need to be protected. Under the Liberal plan, we do offer middle-class tax breaks. We are protecting seniors and their rights and their opportunities to stay in their own homes. We will focus on climate change. We'll focus on restoring the CBC, certainly as restoring the Canada Post. We will not muzzle scientists. We will not work in a governance of fear that divides people and is divisive. We will work as a governance model that is inclusive, a prime minister that will meet with the province, work with the premiers, not someone that is going to ignore all the provinces except for one. We want a prime minister in Justin Trudeau that will meet with the premiers within the first 90 days.
Thank you, Ms. Ludwig.
Thank you.
On behalf of Rogers TV and the Telegraph Journal, we would like to thank all of our candidates. John Williamson from the Conservative Party, Gayla Macintosh from the Green Party, Andrew Graham from the New Democratic Party, and Karen Ludwig from the Liberal Party for their participation in tonight's debate. Along with our panelists, Laura Lyle from CHSJ and John Wishart from the Telegraph Journal for providing this evening's questions. Please remember to vote on Monday, October 19th. Thank you for watching tonight's debate. If you're stuck at home because it's pouring rain, we have 2 more debates coming up in an hour, Fundy Royal, and an hour later, St. John Rossay. So might as well stay on the couch and watch more conversation about the future of our country. For more information on further scheduling of the debate, please visit www.rogerstv.com, or for more information on how to cast your vote, please visit www.elections.ca. Thank you and good night.